Well, isn't this just precious? I already thought it was pretty funny that there were people online assuming that the issue I and many other people had with these increase of prices across the industry was because we were poor, as if the only thing that could determine whether or not you should spend money on something is if you have money, which is ironically a poor man's mentality. And I don't say that to be offensive, but when you speak to pretty much anybody that's built themselves up from rags to riches, or heck, even somebody that was born rich and remained rich, more often than not you find that these people are very calculated about what they spend their money on. That's partially why some of the wealthiest people you may know are often the stingiest. They have an idea of what's worth their money and what isn't. I won't necessarily imply that they're smarter. A lot of times this comes from a place of privilege, and sometimes their stinginess is a little bit too stingy, to the point where it might be embarrassing. But the point is, part of being wealthy is not just having money. It's also knowing when you should or shouldn't spend your money on something that isn't worth the market value, especially when something is a lot more of a luxury. Like, we're talking about actual video games, we're talking about toys. We're not talking about the skyrocketing prices of houses, nor the current value of a car. We're talking about toys. Entertainment, which is why when it comes to entertainment, it's actually a lot easier to convince somebody to vote with their wallet because they don't necessarily need to spend that money. And I know usually the counter to that is that if you don't want to buy something, just stop talking about it and don't buy it, but that won't solve anything or lead to change. Especially when multiple times in this very industry, I have seen an uproar cause a company to completely do an 180, to decrease their prices, to get pushed back, and that pushback is usually good for another decade or so. So it's actually very important for people that have a platform to speak out against these practices in order to adjust the gaming industry, especially in a post-pandemic world where companies are assuming that because people were okay with spending whatever they spent on for a solid 3 years, if not more, then that means they can just continue to increase prices at an unprecedented rate. And I realize the price of everything around us is going up, but the difference is with the gaming industry, if we were to push back, prices would go down and they would still find ways to make plenty of money. They've always found ways to make plenty of money. That's never been an issue, because the bottom line at the end of the day is they want people to buy their consoles so they can buy the software. And literally in every single console generation up until this point, there has been at least one major price adjustment within the first year of a console's launch. And outside of Sega, nobody collapsed because of it. And quite frankly, if you actually look into the history of Sega, their collapse was a whole different story. It was not even remotely because people were like, we refuse to pay this price for this console, so now everybody's gotta get fired. Plus, if you consider the fact that over the past decade, if not 2 decades, we've been paying the prices that they ask us to pay. And despite that, at no point in time has there been a consistent comfort throughout the gaming industry. Whether we pay $80 for games or not, there will still be, on average, absolutely awful worker experiences. The layoffs will still happen, the burnout will still be very hot, and the pockets of every CEO will just get even more full. That's just the reality. There's no indication that with the increase of the price of anything, will the money be properly distributed to the people that deserve it. So don't be fooled into the thought that just because you're paying an extra $10 for your game, it means the developer is earning their money. It's all a fallacy to try to get you to humanize the corporation, because it's never the person that's getting their hands dirty that's actually benefiting from this. And oftentimes, it's not even an employee of the company, it's just a contractor. And the third-party contractors are hired because they can get away without worrying about any of the benefits that would normally come from working for a corporation. And that contractor is gonna get paid the same whether or not you buy the game. Which is precisely why I have a major issue with the former PlayStation executive Shuhei Yoshida insisting that $70 or $80 games are a steal. Because of course he would insist that. Which businessman would not insist that the product that they were involved in is worth more than it actually is? Which multimillionaire would not go out there and tell people that something that's expensive is actually not that expensive? Clearly, if this smart and rich man is doing it, we should all follow suit and spend money on this stuff that this smart and rich man is telling us is worth spending money on, right? That's the kind of message we want to send to everybody here, because that's just how the world runs these days. When the rich folks speak, everybody must listen, because clearly the rich man knows what he's saying since he is indeed a rich person. The funny thing is, this has always been the case, right? This is not something that is exactly new, but through most of my life, it was hidden behind a veil to give you this false idea of equality. But now it just feels like ancient Rome, where the rich set all of the rules and everybody else must follow. And the rich don't even need to argue their case anymore because they convinced the working class to do all of the fighting for them. So now you got a bunch of people that are your equals who have glorified these corporations, being their first line of defense and attempting to steer the narrative in the favor of the corporations. Meanwhile, their fellow customer is just a rage baiter, a clickbaiter, a grifter, or someone that's looking for attention. But the former executive of Sony, Yoshida, all of a sudden, all of the fanboys are praising his name. Not just Sony fanboys, Xbox fanboys as well, and especially Nintendo fanboys. Because, you know, we Nintendo fans have always had a little bit of inferiority complex. We want the Sony guys and the Microsoft guys to think we're cool too. We want people to think Mario Kart 8 is the most expensive game in the world because it validates our purchase of our Switches and our lifelong allegiance to Nintendo. That's why we're also excited to tell everybody that Cyberpunk 2077 looks just as good on the Switch 2 as it does on the PS5, even though it very clearly doesn't. Which, don't get me wrong, is fine. I don't expect a Nintendo console to look as good as it does on the PS5. Well, unless I'm paying PS5 prices or close to it, but that's besides the point. Whatever the case is, don't lie and claim that it runs as well as the PlayStation 5. And I swear the people that make that claim are the ones that are never going to buy Cyberpunk 2077 because they're Nintendo fans. You don't buy Cyberpunk 2077 if you're a Nintendo fanboy. But seemingly, people just want that validation that we have that big boy title and it's on Nintendo's console. And it's worth every penny because the rich man from Sony said that it was worth it. It just honestly gets weirder and weirder to read some of these things that I'm seeing online over the past few months. And it kind of stinks that you don't see the faces or the ages of these people that are speaking to you. Because at the end of the day, I don't know who it is that is defending these prices. Like, even ignoring the fact that it could be a bot or it could be a marketing company that actually works for Nintendo or Sony or Xbox. Let's say it's just a real human being in front of my face. I'm a dude in his mid-30s, so naturally my brain leans towards that thought when I'm speaking to somebody online. And I'm not saying that speaking to somebody in the mid-30s would have the same mindset as I do, but at least I can be like, well, we have the same experience, and you disagree with me, let's have a back and forth about it. But sometimes I read these comments, and I'm like, you're either A, way older than I am, and value video games and your priorities very differently than I do. Maybe you're just somebody that has given up on everything related to society, and you're okay dropping an extra 10 bucks on Mario Kart. Fine. Or B, I could be arguing with a 16-year-old who's calling me poor because I'm not dropping $450 on a Switch 2. And once again, I think this is a problem that's much bigger than the gaming industry, but it just is a reality of when you see these discussions happening online. You legitimately don't know who's saying the stuff behind the comment. But even despite all of that, one of the most annoying things about these increase in prices is that while the games are going up in price, the actual business practices around these titles is not changing. All of those different dangling shiny things that they used to give you in order to get you to pay more for a title is still going to be there. It's just become standard practice in the industry. They're still going to try to charge you early access for unfinished games that are being sold as if they are the full product, all the while leaving out advertised features for those early accesses despite them being promoted. The games are still going to be full of bugs, because why would they waste their time on quality control when they can just patch it into the game later if it sells well? And speaking of selling well, they're going to give you this game for $80, but then if you want to buy all the fancy little upgrades, there's going to be in-game purchases. And if you really want to get the full experience of this title, you're going to probably have to make those in-game purchases. $80 will just be the starting price. Oh, and also you're paying $80 to license a title that's gonna require you to download a crap ton of stuff and maybe even require you to be online, even if it's a single player title, which, need I remind you, is what happened in 2013 with the Xbox. And the gaming community stood together against it. Not only did it get a price drop, it also forced them to change the way that they operate. But that Xbox One became a reality. It's more or less what you see through the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. They just kind of tricked us into getting there in a different route. And you may argue that it was all for nothing, because at the end of the day, we still got to that point. We still eventually made it to the point where people don't own the games that they're playing, and now they want full control so they can brick your console remotely. But with how quickly the industry evolves and how much worse it always gets, the fan backlash pushes back these inevitable realities. It delays it, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years even, which makes more of a difference than you would think. In a world where we didn't push back against the PlayStation 3 nor the Xbox One, the Nintendo Switch would be an all-digital console priced at $600, and the PS5 and Xbox Series X would be at $1,000. And I don't even want to think about how expensive the games would be by this point. So moments like this are very important. I actually think it would have been much more interesting to see the Switch 2 release a little bit later to get a feel for how the market actually will react to crazy prices. Because it's been a little bit over 6 months since the PS5 Pro released, and outside of the early adoption, according to Eurogamer, as of 3 months ago, the PS5 Pro sales have fallen behind what the PS4 was accomplishing around that same time period when it came out. Which tells me that these high prices are only really appealing to early adopters. And part of those early adopters are scalpers. And I don't know how familiar you are with this, but a lot of scalpers that purchased their PS5 Pros ended up either returning them or selling them at a loss. And actually, a few years ago, when the Switch OLED came out, the same thing happened. Many scalpers bought out as many OLEDs as they could because they imagined that the hype from the Xbox Series X and the PS5 was still going, and therefore they could make maybe even an extra $50 or $60 off of each unit. But Facebook Marketplace was filled with Switch OLEDs that were either being sold at cost, or people would just take those OLEDs and return them to the store they bought them from. Now, mind you, this is not to say that the Switch OLED didn't sell well, nor the PS5 Pro, it's too early to tell. But since the launch of the Series X and the PS5, we haven't truly had a test yet. We haven't had a launch of a new console. All we've had is more and more talks of increase of prices and upgraded versions of previous consoles. And I think these next 6 to 12 months are going to be critical going into the next console generation. Because the reality is we don't really know what the entire customer base is willing to pay. We don't know what the whole gaming community is willing to do. The Switch 2 could come out, it could outpace the Switch 1, and Sony and Microsoft could increase the price of their consoles, and people are still buying them at a healthy rate for those companies. And potentially in 2028 or whatever, the PlayStation 6 costs $1,000. Or hopefully what actually happens is the Switch 2 comes out, has a terrible launch window, which will prompt Nintendo to do a price cut and cap their games off at $70, forcing Microsoft to realize they're not getting away with this and they could pull back their prices as well, and keeping the trigger-happy Sony at their price level instead of moving up the way they've been flirting with for the past month, which will potentially somewhat standardize the price a bit so we know what we're dealing with for the next, 5 to 10 years. And I think this kind of works out because the companies won't even have to apologize. The same way they took the blame off themselves and said the word tariffs and increased their prices, they can also say the word tariffs and decrease their prices and make themselves look like the good guys. They don't have to pretend their product suffered because it was an inferior product. They could just be like, oh, yeah, dude, we had the price up there because of the tariffs, but now it's down. We're still doing great, but we're lowering it for you to get more people into our atmosphere because we want them to be buying our games. So it's a win-win. You get to lower your prices without all of the bad PR that would normally come with admitting you made a mistake by overvaluing your product. Whatever the case may be, as far as I'm concerned, it's in our benefit as a gaming community to push back as much as we can over the next year, because right now there's momentum, and there are very few moments in your life where you're able to garner enough momentum to push back against a corporation. I don't think you should go out of your way to fight with somebody or insult them and tell them they're an idiot for buying the Switch 2. I think there are very valid reasons to buy a Switch 2. Most of those reasons are related to modding and homebrew, but that's a whole other discussion that I've already covered quite a bit. But I'm actually very proud of the fact that I have convinced almost every single person I know in real life outside of the YouTubing world to either cancel their pre-order for the Switch 2 or just to not order it altogether. Which is funny because last month I helped some of these people pre-order their Switch because, you know, their family or their friends or whatever the case may be. I was more or less speaking out against the Switch 2 based off of my own personal feelings towards it. But the more of a discourse I am seeing online, the more of a backlash that I'm hearing, and the more I hear a CEO of any company speak about how the Switch 2 is priced fairly and the games are priced fairly and things are naturally going up in price, so we should be happy to pay more to these companies, the more I found not only a backlash within our own gaming community, but I also found within myself the importance of drawing the line in the sand for this industry that I am so passionate about because I want to remain passionate about this industry. There's enough disgusting things in the world going on, and I've said this from the beginning. I just want to be able to play Mario without feeling like I'm getting ripped off. And I could be naive in saying this, but I think we're working towards it. I think in a year from now, we could be looking back at this moment, and many younger gamers will have their first moment in their life where they will see the value of speaking out against one of these gaming corporations and how it could lead to very positive change for gamers. Because I think people have just accepted that change is impossible. So hopefully they're going to get a lesson learned on the value of speaking out and voting with your wallet. But either way, thank you so much for once again joining in and listening, and I will catch you on the next one.